3000.
My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by artist, writer, Tom Gerrard. Thanks for coming, Tom.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I have to say that you're a writer because your essence is within graffiti. Do you feel that that's still a part of you? Will you always be a graffiti writer?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's like it's just a big chunk of my life, you know, and it led me to where I'm at today with my art. So, like, it's like you know, like I've considered myself always a skater as well, but like I don't skate anywhere near as much as I used to. But I still consider myself a skater, if you know what I mean. And I think
once you're a skater, you're always a skater.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that's just with you for the rest of your life. You know, you dedicate so many years to something. It always stays with you. It
is, man. It's like any discipline. You know, you got to put the hard yards in to do that first ollie, and once you do that, then it opens the floodgates. I guess that's a bit like art as well, man. Yeah,
I know. I've recently been learning to surf. I've been surfing only for a year. Yeah, you know, but I remember my friend was like, "Oh God, keep going, mate. You'll get it. You'll get it." And it's like, mate, I learned to ollie. And I learned to do graph. And I learned to speak Spanish. That was the hardest thing for me in my life, you know. But it's like, I know that I can learn stuff. I just need to keep applying. And I did get it. But he was saying that on like my second surf, you know. So
yeah, but I think with something like that, I don't surf. But I imagine it'd click one day and you'd be like, all right, I can feel the progression coming. You know?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's start at the beginning. I know you grew up in Melbourne. Whereabouts did you grow up, man?
I grew up in. I moved around a bit early in my life. Like I was originally, first few years were down in Belgrave, and then my parents broke up when I was 3, and then my dad stayed down that way, and my mum moved to different parts of Melbourne, and then we eventually landed in Kensington when I was about 8 years old. Yep. And so Kensington's where my mum still lives there now.
Yep. So there's a good skate park there now, but not when you're 8 years old.
Oh mate, there wasn't when I was growing up. I was like only skater around. There was nowhere to skate. Like really? As soon as I became old enough to be able to jump on a train and go to the city, I was in there. And so I sort of feel like, you know, the CBD was like the neighborhood that I grew up in.
Yep.
Since probably I'd say from probably 89 through till, I don't know, adulthood. I was just lived in the CBD during the days, but at night I'd go home to Kensington.
Well, it was something that us kids that grew up around the city sort of took for granted. You could just jump on a tram and in 4 stops you're in the city. Yeah. It was like our playground a little bit.
Yeah, I loved it. Like, yeah, man, CBD in the 90s and 2000s was... I know, it's a great place.
Yeah, it feels a bit different now, doesn't it?
Yeah, not many people really lived there back then as well. Whereas now there's so many people living there. But
you could go skating on like a Sunday and there'd be like no one around.
Yeah, totally.
You know, you could skate all down Spence Street or Swanson Street or something without seeing any cars or anything really, you know what I mean? It's not like that anymore.
Yeah. We used to spend lots of time down St Kilda Road.
That was the big skate spot back in the day.
Yeah, that's where all the spots were, all the, the corporate area. And also like Collins Street and all that. There was just lots of spots around.
That was before they started capping everything. I think the sort of late 90s they started capping everything and trying to put an end to it. Yeah.
And also a lot of, spent heaps of time down at Paran at the skate park, but when it was the Dish.
Yeah.
You know, it was the only really like inner city skate park that we had. And
it just had that bowl. And then sometimes someone would put like a sleeper or like turn a bin on its side or something. That was the obstacle for a while until someone moved it.
Yeah, but it was good because I grew up with a jump ramp out the front of my house. Like I'd drag it out. And so like launching out of that bowl came natural to me. You know, it was what I used to like to do.
And it had that little handrail thing, that little triangular handrail as well.
Yeah, that was my first ever handrail. I was I was stoked. Yeah, because it was before like, you know, the Jamie Thomas Zero stuff and all that. You know, it was like to do a handrail was pretty big back then.
Yeah. And so you would have to ollie onto that, do like a backside board slide and then just land straight in the flat of the bowl.
Yeah. Take off, and then push through the flat, and then hit the hump. You know,
and there was that little snaky bit.
Yeah. There was that hump that leads into at the bottom of the snake run. It was.
How old are you when you're doing handrails at Paran?
Oh, mate, I wouldn't call it a hammer by today's standards.
No.
It's like the equivalent of
It's
a
a board
3-stair,
slide.
you know. Yeah, but I don't know. Probably would have been year 8, like
Yeah, cool.
however old that is. I don't know, 14, 13.
That's when it was really big pants and the small wheels and that sort of stage.
Yeah, it was a bit before. I was still like, I don't know. I'm about to turn 46. I don't know. It was like Vision Streetwear and stuff.
So late
back then.
80s.
Yeah, like I was like I saw, that all came in like when I was probably in, year 9, 10. Like it got a bit more like that. All the World Industries brands came out and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah, the big shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so you're growing up in Kensington and you're skating, and then where does art come into it? At school, or you're seeing people do tags at the skate park, or where did you sort of discover art?
I was I sort of with my dad living in Belgrave, I'd go down there every weekend. I've got a twin brother as well, so we'd Dad would pick us up from the city, and then we'd jump on the train and go away down to Belgrave every second weekend. And the trains were pretty hammered back then, especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
And, he used to always say, don't touch the tags. They're probably still wet. And, you had the ink that just wouldn't dry and stuff.
Acetone or whatever.
Yeah. So, it was, as a young kid, there was nothing to do. Like, we'd just look out the windows. And my brother and I would just be pointing out pieces all the time. Hugh Dunnett was a guy that really stood out to us because he'd, do, Pinocchio and all that stuff like that next to his pieces. And, that was like my first sort of introduction to just graffiti. But I didn't like partake in it for years. Like, as we got probably about 12 years old, like me and my friends, like we all had tags and stuff, and we'd write our names around. And like we'd tag the trains and stuff like that. But it was, I don't know, I wasn't really immersed in the culture until I went to high school. And, I went to Prince's Hill in Carlton for, from 7 to 10.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I went to Swinburne for year 11 and 12 that I was just surrounded by graffiti artists.
That's the Paran one?
Yeah.
Yep.
Not Paran. Hawthorne.
The Hawthorne one.
Yeah.
Because there was one at Paran for a bit, but that was,
Yeah. It was there was Paran was more like the university, and Hawthorne had the university as well, but they had the senior secondary college there.
Oh, okay.
And it was a lot of a lot of people who just didn't really fit in at other places. It was an amazing school to go to for meeting people. I was always a very social guy as a teenager, Yeah. And like I don't know, it was like an all-star cast at school. Like, Brad Strutt was in the year above me and hang out with him a bit. And his younger brother was a writer, and hang out with him. And even I just think back to like my studio art class, and it was like, Shazlik, who owned, Obese, he was in it. Binge, Sage used to come and hang out in there. He didn't even go to the school. There was Relic, like all these like famous graph writers. But they were all there, Sat, like, and pretty much like I remember one weekend there was a house party, and all the guys from school went to this party, and they came back after the weekend, and at that party they formed TGC.
Oh wow.
And pretty much everyone in that crew in the beginning all went to Swinburne at that time.
Really? In year 11, sort of year 12?
Yeah, year 11, 12. It was like, it was just like the new crew at school. But it was really inspiring for me, like, because there was like we all looked up to WCA and DMA and crews like that, but they were all like the older brothers, know, and pretty much no one our age was getting let into any of those crews. But when
because you're still the school kids.
Exactly. But when TGC started, it was like I don't know, it was pretty exciting times.
Yeah.
But I had nothing to like. I was just Tom the Skater,
Tom the Skater, yeah.
And I'd hang out with all of them, and people would go do track sides on lunchtime and stuff because the train line went straight past school.
And the train line was there was a few different lines that would meet up at that sort of Glenferrie station there.
Yeah.
So
it was just Lilydale and Belgrave, really.
Yeah.
But But yeah, like I'd sit around and watch them all do stuff, and you catch a train with them, and then they'll do their thing on the trains and stuff, and then even spot guys doing run-ups and back jumps and stuff, and had all the I was doing all the fun things as well, doing back-ons and all this sort of stuff, but I wasn't actually partaking until after I left school.
Yeah. What word are you writing at this stage?
I don't want to say it.
Fair enough if you don't want to. But fair enough if you don't want to.
No, I got in a bit of trouble for it. I didn't want to.
Okay, you don't bring it up. No, okay, that's fair enough.
But it wasn't like even then I wasn't really like as much as I was around it, I wasn't part of it. And then I was hanging out. Like I left home really young, like probably 17 years old, I think.
That is young.
It was a bit too young at the time, but it made sense to me when I was 17,
Yeah.
I ended up going back when I was like 22.
I think everyone who moves out early ends up going home at some stage.
Yeah. It was just a bit hectic at home. I just didn't want to be there. Had house full of mates up the road. And so I'd just go hang out there all the time, and eventually rented a room from there. But they were all older. And it was hanging out with these guys that, like, I know it was during like the rave era and all that sort of stuff.
Mid-90s?
Yeah, it was 95,
Yep.
94, 95, 96, around that era. Mm-hmm. And like, it was all fun and games, but they were a couple of years older than me, and they were doing more old grown up stuff than I was I was sort of ready for, and eventually they one by one, they all started getting hooked on heroin and stuff,
Yeah, I think that happens a lot back then because they have that to counteract the highs so they can try and mellow out, and then they kind of get stuck in it. Is that kind of what happens?
No, not really.
No?
I think there was a naivety to it, right? I could actually sort of pinpoint a moment, and I was real pissed off when I thought about this the other day. And it was when, it was when Train Spotting came out, and Pulp Fiction came out,
glamorized it,
and they kept making out it's not that bad, and there were all these cool guys on screen, all getting on the gear, and then going, I'm going to quit. And even like I was watching Pulp Fiction the other week, and I got so pissed off watching it. Because like John Travolta's, like they're glamorizing the drug deal between John Travolta and Eric Stoltz, and he's like saying, "Oh man, you can have this stuff and you really feel this," and selling him in on the super duper strength heroin, and then he shoots it up, jumps behind the wheel of the car, drives, goes out, takes his boss's wife out for dinner and all that, as if it's nothing. And it's like, mate, like, so these guys were all watching that, thinking it's no biggie, and then one by one they all got on it, and it was a friend of mine from high school, from Swinburne and Princess Hill, actually went to two schools with him. Tuss too. He lived up the road, and his older brother had moved out, and he was just like, "Man, you got to get away from these guys." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, I do." Yeah. And so
it's a toxic environment for a 17-year-old man.
Yeah. So I went and lived with them, and they were all graph writers, and that's pretty much how I got started. Like, but there was all these people I'd known for years, and they'd all only known me as a skater. So when I started painting, they were like, "Nah, man, you can't like
stick to the board, man."
Yeah, what are you doing?
but graffiti and skateboarding kind of go hand in hand, especially in the 90s. You know what I mean? There's a lot of crossover with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, they do. And I don't get me wrong. Like, I was obsessed with graph back then as well. Like, for years, I was walking up and down every train line taking photos and all this sort of stuff. But when you're known as someone that doesn't do it, and then you start doing it, but all these guys have been doing it for years, it's very hard to get approval in their eyes, you know. So it took me a while to sort of cut my teeth. Well, I don't think I ever really won them over, to be honest.
It's a constant pursuit.
Yeah, there's certain people from that era in my life that say, "Oh, you're starting to get good," and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, mate, fuck off.
Yeah, fuck off. I don't need your approval anymore.
Yeah. I feel like I've been all over the world painting and done so much stuff with taking my graph so far, what I consider anyway. And it's so many places and met so many people and that. It's just like, they haven't left Melbourne,
Yeah.
But I get it. I get what they're saying. It's like, because they're just looking at style and stuff like that. And
which is, and we'll definitely talk about the style and the differential of style, but I guess some people can't get their head around I guess some graffiti heads can't get their head around things change, or you're trying to push it in a different direction, and they just want the letters to stay the same, and this is how pieces are done. And that's probably what you're up against when people are saying, "Oh, you're getting there." You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I've had so many eras of my graffiti life where people have just said, "What are you doing?" and like, "Don't do it like that," and this and that, and I'll just never listen to them.
No, because that's the best way to do it. Because who makes these rules? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's for something that's meant to be so lawless and no rules. There's so many rules.
Many rules,
Yeah.
and you don't until you start breaking rules. You're never going to push anything more than what it would be. You know what I mean?
Totally.
That's the idea that I sort of have behind it. All right, so. You moved in with your mates, you got out of the heroin house, which is a good thing.
Yeah, totally.
You moved in with your mates, you're starting to do more graph, and then what's the next step? You're hanging out at Paran a little bit more, you're meeting other people?
No, it's sort of like we started hanging out at a place called Plaza, which we called Flatlands, it was known as, but we called it Plaza, and it's now Federation Square.
Yeah.
But we were skating there a lot, and then eventually they opened sale yards and all that. And I was working as a chef in the city after school, once I left school. And, it was I'd just knock off work. I'd do breakfast and lunch and be out of there at 3 o'clock every day or 3:30, and then just jump on my board, ride down the hill and be at the sale yards. And it was there I started to really, we had a crew and... and there was heaps of us in it. It was great. Like heaps of skaters, but there was lots of graph riders as well. And around that era, probably 96, 97 was when I started really getting out there. And, I don't know, I was painting trains and doing track sides and all that sort of stuff,
And is this where AEON is born in this sort of period? Still not?
Nah. Nah, didn't start riding AEON until I got busted real bad. I don't really want to go into that.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a bit of a sticky situation, but ended up just a lot of guys who were all caught up in it all sort of semi-stopped.
Yeah.
They still claimed it and they still were into it, but they just weren't as active.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was just getting started. It's like, man, I'm just starting to get the hang of this. I don't want to stop.
Yep.
And then and then I was just doing some sketches one night, and I was watching that Aeon Flux show on the MTV show, the old cartoon.
Yeah.
I did an Aeon sketch, and it was like these letters are working. And
it is interesting because there's not too many words that have 3 vowels in them.
Yeah.
Do you like that interesting nature about it?
Mate, I didn't give a shit. I didn't think about any of that stuff because all I was trying to do was do something that looked good,
Right. Okay.
And I was writing Serum for years. This is before the Serum here in Melbourne.
Yep.
I was writing Serum actually with an E, and but that was given to me by one of my mates, and I had other people giving me different tags to write and that. But it was just like it sounded good, and the letters worked for that person, but for
kind
me,
of
it
sounds
just wasn't.
infinite a little bit. Like it has. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's big. It sounds big.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I wasn't even really thinking about even the sound. I was just trying to get letters that actually I could do that worked together. And once I landed on that combo, I was like, that's it. And I remember saying to my friend, I go, keep an eye out. I'm going to put this up everywhere. And he goes, yeah, we'll see. There it is.
Did you get his approval in the end?
No, I don't seek approval.
I don't seek approval. So you found
it was just disappointing,
So you found your word, and now you're really starting to go and give that a crack. And is this when you sort of meet the SDM dudes, or?
Yeah, I met them about 99, 2000, around then. And that was good for me because I didn't know any of those guys before that. Like Method went to Swinburne as well, so I knew him. But not even I didn't even know he was a graph writer. I just knew him as a guy that smoked bongs in the park. It's like
a lot of the kids,
like all of us, But he was the only one I really knew. And then and I was painting a lot with Irie at the time, and him and I were sort of I guess we're graph partners. We're going out and doing the track sides and stuff like that. Yeah. And we got Irie got let in, And
he was doing that 3D stuff back then as well.
Yeah. And a cousin of mine writes Rancor or Arcor. He's in SDM as well, and he actually got me in the crew.
Right.
And then I think it was like within the month, like Jimmy Deviate was put in as well.
Yep.
So it was like the crew went from being a few guys to started to form something. You know.
Did you? Was it like a ceremony? Did Mick give you a marker and go?
Nah. I think it was one of those. I felt like I almost got in as sympathy. You know what I mean? It was like because I was with Arcor and Irie, and those guys were both in it, and it was like, we'll put him in, you know. And but it was really good for me because they were guys who I didn't have to prove anything to, you know. So it was the first time in my graffiti career that I wasn't looking down to guys who've been doing it for over a decade and had knew their way around it. Like they just accepted me for who I was, and it was really good.
Yeah, and everyone sort of had their own kind of style, and you know that you could do the big productions, and it kind of looked like you've got dudes with different styles. You've got some doing 3D, you've got some that doing other stuff, and I think that everyone kind of complemented each other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but really, at the end of the day, we're just a group of mates, you know.
Yeah,
and everyone's comes with their own influences, and then they inspire other people through what they're doing, you know. Yeah,
and it must make you proud. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right. Go.
Seeing a lot of the people from that crew get their success in all sorts of, you know, different, mostly artistic ways. Like you look at some of the people that came out of that crew now and doing some massive stuff.
Yeah, totally. Like you know, Dabs and Myla and
huge.
You know, Deviate and Jumble. Like lots of people who are going down their own path doing stuff. You know, it's it's really really interesting. Even you know, like I don't know what Irie's up to these days, but I've heard murmurs about like his profession, and it really leads into the 3D stuff. Like he's designing like I don't know if it's folklore or not, but I heard he was designing parts for aeroplanes and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like he's taken that like painting 3D graffiti to, you know, new things. But you know, don't quote me on that.
No. Well, I'll have to do some research into it.
Oh, I don't know. He's off the radar.
Off the radar? A lot of people are.
Yeah, you won't find him.
You won't. So back then, so you're painting trains and you sort of, you really want to go hard with this sort of graffiti thing. And then...
Just to correct you, by the time I got in SDM, I'd given up painting the trains. I painted a few after that, but I'd gone down pretty badly. And they seemed to really care about the trains more than anything else.
Yeah, it was like a significant thing. Like, don't take out. You can have the walls. Don't take out trains.
Exactly. And then it wasn't just that. Because I had a full-time job, and I went out and did a few. And I remember even just to get one train painted, like I'd go out like maybe for 5 nights, and it didn't happen. And then you're knackered at work the next day. Yeah. And then you do get over. And then you got to chase it around all day, call in sick, all this sort of stuff. And I was just thinking, you know what? Yeah. I'll just stick to the track sides. Like that was what I was really into. It was just track sides and just doing tags on the streets. Yeah. You know?
And then when those guys were painting trains, they do the whole train thing. You're just like, nah, I'm out of that because you'd already been busted. So you just
I was pretty big on documenting it all though. Like I like any video footage and all that you've seen of that is all from me. Yeah. And I filmed heaps of. I was chasing panels and filming them all, and a lot of the footage I was filming back then, like, ended up in the Jizzo movie and stuff like that. Yeah, and I had a like Video 8 camera. I was really right into it, but I just wasn't committed enough. There were 2 skaters that made it. Jack and Eddie, and then. I just had heaps of footage, and he and Jizzo asked me, for some footage because I had lots of footage of panels running, and he was like, "Oh, you got any footage of my trains running and stuff?" And because he was painting predominantly with the SDM guys, I had heaps of footage. Yeah, it was as simple as that. Really, I didn't have anything to do with the production, but I'd known Jizzo for years through skating. Yeah. And to me, he was a skater, and it was like, he was one of those guys that's like, oh, you're right now. It's like I knew he he was always criminal minded.
Yeah,
he was always up to no good, you know.
So yeah, man, that DVD. Well, I've only ever seen the footage that's come out on YouTube, but I had Ben Aitken on the show last week. I went back to his house. He's got that on DVD, which I've never seen.
Yeah,
before.
so do I.
You do?
Yeah,
that must be rare as fuck, man.
Yeah. Yeah, don't have a DVD player. So I got the Jizzo DVD.
DVD. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that whole thing became like a cultural sort of underground thing for a lot of kids that got into graffiti.
Yeah.
That I totally forgot about, and then it just pops up on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting time because there were guys that came out of skating who were really good at documenting stuff, and like some of them started as like skate photographers or whatever. But like another one was like, say, Ashley Gilbertson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was a Melbourne skater who did a lot of he was a photographer, but he did some really good photos of graph writers like in the city loop, like on the top of trains, like hanging out and tagging and stuff. And he'd do stories for The Age.
Yeah.
And now he's gone on and won all these awards overseas. He lives in New York now. He did all these like documentation over during the Afghanistan war and all
I have
sorts of
seen
stuff.
that guy.
Yeah.
What have I seen him on? Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
him on a TV like an interview with him. Yeah,
possibly, but yeah. So like Jack and Eddie, who made the Jizzo film, were like other skaters who were like keen to document. Like they weren't really partaking in the culture so much, but they knew the players and they just found it really interesting. It was like, I got to film this. You know? Yeah.
And then it didn't get that much love when it first was dropped, but then with YouTube, it becomes like a cultural underground sort of like cult following sort of thing.
Yeah. Like I was living in London and had graph writer come up to me going, "Oh, have you heard of this guy?" And it's like, yeah. And they're like, "Oh, we're all watching it on YouTube." Like it's like globally famous, like in the graph scene.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because like I actually, because I was thinking about it the other day and I watched it like probably a month ago, and he's pretty bang on with a lot of the stuff he says, you know. Like I know he's like some of it, you can laugh at a lot of it, but as far as coming down to the graffiti culture and graffiti mindset, he lays it out in that movie, you know, as far as this is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. And it's pretty much how all of us were thinking about it back then, but he just took it very seriously.
And apparently he's not doing great, and is that sad for you to see?
Yeah, well, as one of many friends who I've seen go down a bad path.
All right, so now I guess you're getting to that age where you're kind of outgrowing Melbourne a little bit and you're thinking about heading overseas. I know you've definitely got some stamps in your passport, so where did you head off to first?
Well, yeah, I wasn't necessarily outgrowing Melbourne, but I'd been talking about travelling for years. But, you know, people say stuff and it's like, oh, I'm going to go overseas, I'm going to do this, going to do that. But, I remember I was working as a chef at the time. And but I was I was working at a friend had taken over a restaurant, and him and I had been running the kitchen, and it turned into really long hours, like like 10-hour shifts, at least the 10 to 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. And I was just getting so burnt out, and so I quit that job and just took on a real basic job. Like Colonial Stadium at the time, well, Marvel Stadium now, whatever, had just opened. And I had a job just going around setting up the function rooms in there.
Yep.
And working behind the bar.
I did that same job, man.
Yeah.
For Delaware North back in the day, working there. Yeah.
So cruisy,
when that first opened.
Hey, just walking in circles all day around the stadium.
I was pouring beers at 16.
Yeah.
They didn't even ask for an RSA or whatever. They fucked it up. And I was pouring beers at 16. When that first opened, it was Colonial.
Yeah.
There you go.
I worked the first ever gig they had there, Barbra Streisand concert.
Oh.
Yeah. I was in the Medallion Lounge.
Oh yeah, nice.
That was my spot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was just taking on sort of more chilled out jobs where I didn't have much responsibility. I just felt it was a bit too much for a 22-year-old kid to have a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. And so another job that popped up, because I moved back in with my parents in Kensington, and I was just like, oh, this is just living a bit of a cruisier life. And the Melbourne Cup was coming up, and it was only 6 days' work for the Spring Racing Carnival. And I thought, I'll take that on as well. And while I was working there, you know, I was single, and there was I met there was an English backpacker chick working there, and we hit it off. And like, at first it started off as like, you know, I saw her, I thought, oh, she's cute, you know, and then the manager didn't know, because no one knew each other. It was like first day for everyone, you know. And he walked up to me, he goes, because I worked heaps of hospo, so I knew what I was doing. He goes, oh, you know what you're doing. He goes, this chick's got no bloody idea. Can you look after her? And I walked up to her, and she's there just like about 30 goes to try to get the bottle off a beer and stuff like that. I mean, the lid off a beer bottle, and I started talking to her, and that's ended up marrying her down the track. I'm still with her till this day.
Wow.
And that was I was in 2000, so 23 years ago.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's my wife Claire, and then and her visa she'd been traveling around, and she was just working different events. Like, she worked the Sydney Olympics were on before then, and she came down to Melbourne and worked Melbourne Cup, and then and then she went traveling around Australia, and then came back to Melbourne, and eventually her visa ran out, and she was like, I'm going back to England. And I was like, shit, what do I do? And I thought, I've been talking to everyone about the fact I'm going to go traveling for so long. And and I just you know, booked a ticket and went with her.
Yeah, nice.
And that was my first time out of Australia.
Yeah.
And and when I got over there, it's just lived there for 2.5 years, and worked in the skate industry and all that. But I felt like I went over there with high ambitions to paint a lot, but it was a lot different to Melbourne. You know,
really? How did it differ?
Like, I tell you what, like, because you know, Melbourne tracksides, especially back in that era, were hammered. Like they still are, but it's a bit buffed out now. But back then it was, you know, productions everywhere. So I thought, like, I pulled up and I was catching a train up and down the lines, and it was just these chrome, they call them dubs over there, and it's just chrome pieces everywhere. And I thought, man, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to roll the backgrounds. I'm going to do productions on the train lines. I'm going to really stand out in this city. And I went out so many blotched attempts. You know, you get halfway through rolling the background to get chased. You haven't even got the cans out your bag.
By cops or other people?
Just, mate, I don't know. Just like, tell you what, when there's a flashlight coming down the tracks at you, don't stop and ask who they are. You just get out of there.
But you think the walls are just too red hot there?
Yeah, and also they've got the in Melbourne, you can get onto the train lines pretty easy. Over there, it's like a fortress, you know.
Because of the tube and everything.
Yeah, but it's just they've got these thing called 3 prongs over there. Do you know what they are?
Yeah.
It's like this really harsh industrial metal that's like, it goes up as a pole and divides into 3, and it's like
a trident.
Yeah. And you got to get through that, over that, to get onto the tracks and stuff. And it was just really hard. And then I knew friends who were getting busted over there as well, and the penalties are really high. And I just sort of started to step back a little bit, and I was really pissed off because I felt like I was in my graph heyday, you know. Yeah. And then so then I started traveling around Europe a lot, and doing stuff as I was traveling.
And it's a lot easier there by all reports in parts of Europe.
Oh,
it depends where you are.
Depends which part of Europe you're in. But
I think that's why people go on spraycations over there, I think, because it's a bit more cruisy.
Yeah. And it's so, there's so many people doing it, you know, and you can get around, and you can, you know, the interrail thing's really popular, and, you know, but like, that was my first stint. I was working for a skateboard company over there as well. And, I felt like, I don't know, I got into a bit of a tough part of life, really, because, you know, I didn't want to like ask my parents for money or anything like that, but I was really living poor, you know. And
it's expensive there.
Yeah, like I lived in so many like weird like hostels and stuff like that. Like, but you know, and then when I finally got a house with some other guys, I moved into this house with 7 South Africans, and it was only a 3-bedroom house, and so I was sharing a bedroom with other guys, and just so much of that type of living. And then working in a warehouse for a skateboard company, and there's a big distribution over there called New Deal Distribution. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then but just they had the roller door open all day, every day, and you work and it's snowing outside, blowing in, and you're gripping boards and just do it. Like it was just tough living, and eventually, I ended up moving into an asylum seeker house, which I didn't realize at the time that I was moving into. I answered the ad on the front of a milk bar, It just said room for rent, and it had the price, and I was like, yeah, that's my price. That's the sort of price I'm looking for. And it was the first time Claire and I had ever lived together, and we moved in there together, and it was like this 15-bedroom house in Primrose Hill, which is a nice area, and but it was the house with all the pigeons on the roof, and so we moved in there, and first it was just us, and it was only like bed sit with shared bathroom and kitchen on every floor, so it was 5 floors, and
crazy place, man.
Yeah, and then one by one, all these like families started moving in there, and we were like, what? Like, where are all these people coming from? And they filled up the whole place, and then we realized that we were actually in a refugee home, and the person that was managing it had sort of signed off that it was only 14 rooms, and then they rented out the 15th room
to put some money
to
in
us
the pocket.
That's why it was just an ad on the milk bar, it wasn't it was below board, so to speak. And lived there for about 10 months, and that was it was a real eye-opener, and like we were speaking to people.
Because it's all communal. You sort of, you can't keep to yourself, can you?
Oh, no. We were like in the kitchen hanging out with people while they're making naan bread and that, and just talking, just chopping it up, and they were going, what are you doing here? And it's like, oh, we just live here. And they're like, this place is a shithole. Like, this is people who are refugees saying it's a shithole.
Yeah.
And then, it got to a point where I was just like, man, I got to fucking sort my life out. Like I'd never finished high school. I didn't want to work hospo again. I had no career aspirations or anything. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life.
You didn't want to stay within skateboarding as an industry?
Nah, man. Because, like, after 2.5 years working there, I could have been working in a toilet paper factory. It's like it
loses magic.
The magic had gone.
Yeah.
It was just packing boxes and gripping boards, and it wasn't that much fun. Yeah. It was fun in the beginning, though. Don't get me wrong. And then my sister works for RMIT, and I got her to send me over all the like course brochures, I guess. So she put an envelope in the post of every course brochure to do with creativity. So I knew that whatever I did in life, I wanted to be in the creative field. Yeah. And at that time, I was completely computer illiterate as well. Like, I remember there was like an internet cafe in like Finsbury Park, like underneath the McDonald's. Like, it was actually in a McDonald's internet cafe.
Wow.
And it was around that era, but I remember like Claire had an office job, so I was like sitting there going, oh, can you do the typing? And I was so like just shit with, I just didn't have any of those type of skills, if you know what I mean.
But that is also because of the generation. So because you're a little bit older, computers aren't just the norm yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm 5 or 6 years younger, and it wasn't until I'm in year 11 that everyone's like, you need an email address. Yeah. Anyone older than me, you could breeze through school without even using a computer.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I remember to send an email, like I'd have to say to, oh, Claire, can you load it all up? And then I'd dictate to her what I wanted to say, and then she'd hit send. Like, I couldn't even send an email for myself. It was, that's just how I was back then. And that's how a lot of people were as well. It wasn't just me.
Yeah.
Like, people were scared of computers. It was like, oh, isn't that something that nerds use or something like that? They seem like an encyclopedia to you or something like. It's like, what do you do with these things? I only used them for booking airfares to Europe. I knew how to do that. But and I knew how to look at graph on them as well. Even back then, it'd take like ages to load a photo.
Was that the website then?
Yeah, Graffiti Hub, and there was Art Crimes and all that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that, actually saying that, it was like, that was my first opportunity to get. I remember I bought a digital camera and I was sending photos to Art Crimes, and it was really interesting to be able to paint walls and have them on a hub that all graph writers all over the world were looking through, and you could go city by city or name by name, and yeah, I remember actually getting pretty excited about getting my art, my pieces seen on the internet.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So what ended up happening is I read through all these course booklets and realized that I wanted to learn how to use computers and I wanted to be creative. And then I worked out that graphic design was the path for me to go down. So I out the front of the refugee home, there was a phone box, and I remember having a interview with Swinburne, the Param one, to get into their graphic arts TAFE course. And because of the time difference, like for them, I could have been calling from bloody Brighton for all they know. Yeah. You know, I was calling from London. It was 4 a.m. I was in a phone booth, and it was snowing, and I had to go to work. I had to get up for work at 6 anyway, so I just stayed up. But I remember doing the interview and all that, and I ended up getting in, and so I flew back to Melbourne for that.
So it wasn't folio based; it was an interview based.
No, it was actually it was folio based. Now you reminded me. And these were the first canvases I ever did. Actually, I bought some canvases and I painted them. They had like a little, like a soccer. They're like little grass soccer courts with AstroTurf, and they're in a cage. Mm-hmm. And they had lots of council flats around where we were, and so I'd go behind them and just paint these like canvases just with whatever I could think of that wasn't graph, you know. Yeah. And I used that for my folio. And I remember I got into Swinburne and the coordinator goes, "Oh, I remember you. Did we let you in?"
Really? Thought, that derogatory, like that sort of negative spin.
And he was the guy I spoke to over the phone. And I thought, you prick. Yeah. And I remember like when, I don't know, all throughout my life, because I don't know, not doing well in school and all that sort of stuff, I thought, and whenever someone said that sort of stuff to me, I thought, I'll fucking show you. Yeah, you know, and it was same with the graph writers in Melbourne when I was coming up. It's like, mate, you can't write, like that piece sucks, all this sort of stuff. It's like, you fucking wait, you know. Yeah. Just give me a few more years to catch up, you know. And so I remember that really lit a fire under my ass, and I got graduated, and then I don't know what the deal is, but they did this thing where if you get a certain level, you can go do the final year, because I was only a TAFE course. I did the final year of a degree as well and got a degree. Awesome. And but when I finished the TAFE course, I got a job working in the film and music industry and doing like lots of street press stuff and DVD covers and all that sort of stuff. But then I did the final year of a degree while I had a full-time job. And that was a tough year of my life, you know. Yeah.
And you're still trying to paint as well.
Oh, yeah, I was painting heaps.
So you're really burning the candles at every end.
Well, I remember when I left London to come back to Australia, I left on my own because Claire didn't have her visa ready yet. So I flew to New York. And I'll tell you what, as soon as I got, you know how I said like everything was real hard in London and that? As soon as I got to New York, the handbrake just released. And it was my first time like overseas, like on my own. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, I painted every day. Like I reckon I painted like 4 pieces a day.
Really?
Like track sides.
In New York City?
Yeah, like rooftops, track sides, like everything.
And it was just way more chill, just easier, or it's just more accepted, or?
Well, I was with active writers. Yeah. Like I went there, I didn't know anyone.
So how'd you find
Actually, I did guys? know. I knew one person. I knew Maya Hayek, who's a famous artist now, and had her contact, and we hung out. But through her, I met some other graph writers, and then I just went out painting. But the weird thing was I was the only white guy amongst them, right? And so that like we'd go out painting, but then they'd take me to parties and stuff like that. And there was heaps of uncomfortable experiences, like just being like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And they're like, "Relax, relax. He's from Australia." And they're like I went to this one party, and it was in the Queensbridge projects. Yeah. And they
it's where NASA's from.
Yeah,
I think,
and Mobb Deep, and all of them. It's the biggest projects in America. Yeah. But they walked up to the door, and there was a door with a window next to it, and they just pounded on the door like doom, 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 like they were the cops. And then my friends all ducked down, and I was just standing there. And the guy opened the door, and he goes, "Who the fuck are you?" And then my friends popped up, "Hey," like that, and they're like, "Hey," like they're all saying hi and greeting each other. I go, "No, seriously, who's this guy?" And they're like, "Oh, he's Tom. He's a writer from Australia and all that. He's with us. He's cool and all this sort of stuff." And he goes, "Oh, if you're from Australia, say something Australian." I said, "I don't know, man. What do you want me to say?" And he heard the accent. He goes, "Damn, son, that's some exotic shit."
Some exotic shit.
He goes, "You're going to get me some pussy tonight."
Really? It's so funny to think that our Bogan accent is something that's so unusual to some places in the world.
Yeah. And he walked up, got me a beer out the fridge. He walked around a party with his arm around me. He walked up to girls. He goes, "See something," like that. He just kept making me talk and all that. And
Like
it
a
was
little
cool.
ventriloquist style.
Yeah, like, hey, I tell you what, like I was a bit intimidated, so it was cool to have someone on my side, you know.
Yeah, and then but you just felt that there you could breathe, you could paint, you could do what you wanted to, like.
Yeah, like I went on the full graph adventure when I was in New York. Like I went up. I had Blades details, and he was living in Fallon Bay Park in the Bronx in the projects there, and I contacted him and went and hung out with him for the day.
Awesome,
and that was man, that was an awesome experience. Like, I remember I had my everywhere I went, I had my had subway art, spray can art, and a sketch and a black book. And so I got him to do pages upon pages, and we drank a bottle of tequila together.
Wow.
And I remember, he'd been like, his job at the time was like delivering newspapers and milk or something like that. And I was told, like, you know, just tell him, just when you contact him, say you want to come over and buy photos. And I was like, man, I want to buy photos off him anyway. Yeah. So I bought a whole bunch of flicks off him, and he showed me all his art that he had and all that sort of stuff. And I remember it got quite late. Well, it was late for him because I showed up. He got me to show up at like 9 or 10 in the morning. We drank a bottle of tequila and a few beers, and I remember I was real pissed when I left. And I'd had a big night the night before, and he goes, "Look, let me call you a cab because like you can't go down there alone. You can't be hanging out around here on your own." It's like, all right, cool. And he called me a cab. I went downstairs. There was some guys like just hanging out there. The cab pulled up. They just jumped in and it took off. And then I'm trying to buzz Blade again, going, I waited about 20 minutes actually, and then I was buzzing and going, "I think my cab's gone. Can you call me another one?" But he didn't answer. He would have been asleep. And I was like, shit. And I tell you what, like, I took a panoramic photo from his balcony, and as far as the eye could see was just project towers. Yeah. And it was the middle of winter, and it was pretty eerie. And I was like, shit, what am I going to do here? And I ended up seeing a bus, and it said Fallon Bay Park, which is where the station I needed to go to. And I thought, all right, cool. I ran and jumped on that bus, and it got pretty full, but it drove around to every building. Yeah. And I ended up falling asleep on the bus.
Oh, dude.
And I was like, 'cause I was real tired. I was drunk. I was like sobering up, and I was just, I fell asleep on the bus, and the bus was pretty full when I fell asleep. And when I woke up, it was stationary, and there was no one on it. And I was like, fuck, where am I? And the bus driver was there. He was just like asleep in the front seat. And I walked up and I just tapped him on the shoulder. I go, "Excuse me, man." He woke up and he's like, "What are you doing?" You know, he was like, "What the fuck are you doing on the bus?" And it's like, "Man, I fell asleep," you know. And and I asked him where. I said, "Look, I need to get to the train station." And he goes, "All right, no worries." And he said, "You walk 2 blocks down." And he goes, "You look to your left and you'll see the train bridge that's a few blocks down."
Is it still night at this stage? Or
no, this is all daytime.
Oh, so
this is all day. And he goes, you walk down there and then you turn left and you walk down there. And he goes, "And a white boy like you better watch his ass."
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, oh no. And I'll tell you what, it was the longest walk, man. And it was but it was one of the many adventures I had.
What an experience, man.
Yeah.
Hang out with Blade and
I went and hung out with Scene as well.
Really?
Went to his tattoo studio. Yeah, it was really cool because I met this guy who because that's the thing, like this would have been 2002, 2003, and like I don't know, Aussies in New York weren't that common, you know. And
so you're a novelty in yourself.
Yeah. So
and the fact that you like graffiti, they're like, do they do graffiti in Australia?
Yeah,
Were they
everyone's
saying
like,
that sort of
what do you paint on trees? You know, it's like, no, we got the cities and everything.
Buildings and trains.
Yeah. So like, there was a shop called Pearl Paint where everyone used to go to, even back in the 80s. Everyone went there, but I went there and bought some. I was buying Beltons and stuff like that, and art supplies as well, and. The guy working there took a liking to me, and I go out to the bar with him and some other people, and he was, they'd sell like, they had like scene and cess canvases in the window, and they even had Dondi canvases and everything in there.
Yeah, wow.
And he said, look, I sold some of Scene's canvases. I got to go up to the Bronx to give him the money. Do you want to come with me? And it's like, fuck yeah. So, that was pretty cool experience, you know.
He was nice.
He was really nice, mate. I was with the guy that was handing him money.
Yeah. He's like, yeah.
He's got no problem with me, you know. But he was like, he was pretty happy that when someone from the other side of the world knows who you are, you don't.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of flattering. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So then, New York. Did you paint anywhere else in the US or?
Yeah. After that, I went to LA. Which was more of a skate trip for me.
Yeah. And a different scene graffiti-wise?
Yeah, I didn't know any riders over there. So I just went to, I just skated all the famous skate spots.
Yeah.
And then I went up to San Francisco, and I was had the same thing in mind, just skate all the skate spots. But I actually met some skaters who were graph riders as well. So that was like the perfect mix for me. Like I think I just had heaps of fun in San Francisco, because it was just like skate during the day, go to all these famous skate spots, and then just go out and just drink beers and paint all night.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, I loved it.
You didn't think about staying in any of these places? I guess you can't really, can you?
I was on my way to start TAFE, you know.
Oh, so this is your last hurrah before you go and knuckle down and get a real job.
Yeah, this was the frustration of living in London for 2.5 years, and not really being able to paint.
Yeah,
and then I got it. Like I was always there's been different eras of my life where I've let the handbrake off and just been like, all right, now I can do it. And when I got back to Melbourne, I did more pieces it was 2003 or 4, I think. I did more pieces that year than I ever done in my life because I was studying and had a part-time job, and I just had lots of free time, and
you'd seen the world, and you'd seen, you know what I mean? I guess you probably had a bit to let.
But after, like, when you're searching for spots in like really heavily populated cities that have a lot of security and that, and you get back to Melbourne in those days anyway, that's so easy. It's like you just hop a little fence and get you on the train line. It's like, man, this is so easy.
Yeah.
So I started painting a lot during the day then, and even in the evening, my theory was to just go out at night and just be home by dinner, last train or whatever. Like in winter, it was as soon as it got dark, I was straight down the train lines.
Yeah.
Because even when trains are going past, you can't see out the windows because it's all lit up inside. And I got really productive those years.
Yeah. By yourself then? You got a partner here?
At that stage, I was sort of I was meeting new people. Yeah. It was when I got back and there was this street art thing bubbling up. That's something I forgot to mention actually. When I was living in London, I was hanging out with a lot of the street art crowd, like D-Face, Mysterious L, who lives here now. He's part of it. He was part of the gang, and but then it was Banksy was doing all his early stuff. He was just part of the scene. He wasn't even famous back then, you know. There was all this street art bubbling, but I was all my graph writer mates were going, don't hang out with those toys. It's not a good look. So I was still, even though I was hanging out with them, I was still just doing pieces, and I didn't want to tarnish my rep so much, Yeah,
and it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and then when I got back to Melbourne, it was starting to bubble up over here. There was a Blender Studio had just started. And I started hanging out with all those guys a bit, and that's where I met Roan and Rekka was part of it, and Haha and Fakaris, and there was all these other people that were part of those early days, and some of them were art students who had turned to the streets, and other people were just like graphic designers who'd turn to the streets. It was all weird. It was like, but it was the first time in my life that I'd seen a lot of art that was happening on the streets that hadn't come from a graffiti background. And to be honest, like, there's a lot of lovely graph writers out there, but the street art guys were you didn't have to bloody worry about getting stabbed or something.
Yeah. But that was an influence that came from overseas, because I think that London and parts of the UK had more of a street art scene before. Like, obviously Melbourne is known for it now, but back in the late 90s, 2000s, that was only very, very infancy sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You weren't seeing many paste ups or things like that around town until like sort of 2000s, really.
Yeah. This was early 2000s. This would have been, I think that when I first met those guys, it would have been about 2004.
Yeah.
But that was interesting, and I remember like one of a key player in that really bridged the communities was Phibbs when he entered the scene. He came down from Sydney, and he taught those guys how to use spray paint, a lot of them, and he bridged the communities, and he's one of those guys that never lost his cred, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You got to tip your hat to Phibbs. He's done a lot for the scene.
Yeah. And he's still very active.
He loves it.
Yeah.
He loves it. But so I came back and studied graphic design, and then got a job, and then worked. I tell you what, like, all I did was painted graph and worked for like 6 or 7 years, and I was falling into a bit of a cycle of just drinking heaps, just drinking with my mates and going painting, and at that era I started the Flyers crew with my mates, because I wasn't even hanging out with the SDM guys that much. I felt like I was sort of drifting off with a different crowd.
They're doing their own thing.
Yeah. Like we all came back together later on, but like just for me personally, I just didn't feel like I was putting up crews where I hadn't spoken to people for years. And then after a while, I ended up just got to a point where I was just a bit frustrated and bored with life, and I was getting in really bad shape from just eating Palmers and drinking beers too much.
That's me. That's my life.
I tell you what, like, I look at photos then, and like, I don't know, that was like 2007. I look at photos of me then, and I reckon I look older than I do now.
Yeah. Diet plays a big factor.
Oh yeah. I was riding my bike everywhere, but that's not enough. Not when you're smashing Palmers and pints. But yeah, after a while, after a few years of that, my wife was just like, what are you going to do? Like, what
she's living in Australia now.
Oh, sorry, yeah. We were only apart for 6 months.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because then you get married so she can get a residency.
No, we weren't even married at that point. We didn't get married until like 13 years into the relationship or something.
But they let her stay, because most people from the UK can't stay longer than 3 years.
Yeah, she had a loophole. She her auntie had married a diplomat in Canberra.
Oh wow!
And, a few
it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, there was. Tell you what, there was a visa got passed that no longer exists.
Oh, nice. And, man, I feel sorry for some of these people, especially where I spent a lot of my time in St Kilda, Paran, Chapel, that sort of thing. A lot of English people that just want to stay here, and the hoops that they have to jump through, and the money that they have to spend just to even get another year here and a year there. It's fucking outlandish, man.
It is.
It's a bit sad as well. Like, if people want to live here and they're going to contribute to society in some way, why don't you let them? I never can get my head around that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I'm lucky. You're lucky that you knew someone. So she's here, and she's just saying, you're doing your painting, you're eating a lot of Palmers. Yeah. And then what's the next step?
I was just trying to sort my life out, I was because what happened is, like, we bought an apartment in Paran. Oh, not Paran, what was I saying? Paran, in St Kilda. Yep. And then and I had a good job, had a degree, You're
using computers now, obviously?
Using computers, like all this sort of stuff. And on paper and to my mates, I looked like I had all my shit sorted out. And I thought I did. And I thought, and Claire was saying, oh, this is boring. She was working in corporate jobs, like hating it. Yeah. And she's like, this can't be it. This can't be the rest of our lives. And it's like, and I was sort of saying, I've never had it so good. I've never been so well set up in my life, you know. And I didn't think I'd ever, you know, when you're young, you don't know where you're ever going to wind up. So for the fact I had a career and all that sort of stuff and good group of mates and I was having a good time and I was still doing graph, I thought this is pretty good. But she was pretty adamant to sort of want to shake things up. So we decided to sell everything apart from the apartment. We sold all our possessions and we bought one-way tickets to Latin America, to Buenos Aires. And, and then we just went on a massive adventure and, like pretty much like we traveled, like we straight away we went up to, like, we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. And everyone kept going, oh, watch yourself. Like, why are you going there? It's so dangerous and all this sort of stuff. But we, as soon as we arrived, we spent a while in Argentina. There we went, a carnival was happening in Brazil. So we flew up to Brazil for that. And it's, this is like week 2.
Yeah. And you're what, like 25, 26 or something?
No, I reckon I was like 31.
So you're a bit older. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I remember like we're in Salvador for carnival because everyone's like, that's where you got to go because it's more authentic and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, all right. And it's like, man, like day 2, like it was, the sun had just set and it was like pretty dark on the beach. No, that was actually pretty lit up. It was all floodlights and that, but there was this dark shadow from a building on the beach. And we were walking down the beach and just drinking a beer. And these guys, these like young kids, like before that, someone said to us like the day before, watch out for the young kids. They can do anything and not go to jail.
Wow.
And it's like, shit. These young kids came out of the shadows and they were saying in Portuguese, give me a beer. And I was like, oh, this is all I got, you know. And then one of them just pulled out a massive knife and just put it straight to my throat.
Fuck.
And I was like, fuck. And then he grabbed me by the balls.
Grabbed you by the ball, the dick and balls.
Like he had a knife to the throat and grabbed me by the balls. And I just put my hands up and said, man, take whatever you want, you know.
Yeah. But your wife must be freaking out.
Oh, she was a bit, they just went through her bag and that. And like, we'd been on the beach. Like my board shorts were still wet, you know. Yeah. Like I was just had a towel and they were like, they kept just saying like in Portuguese, where's the money? And it's like, man, this is all we got, you know?
Yeah.
But I looked in their eyes and they were wasted. Like they were fucked up on drugs and that. And I was like, shit, don't slit me throat, you know? And that was sort of like a bit of a warning. Like, you know, do you guys want to keep going on this trip? Because there's going to be more shit like this.
Well, it's better that happens at the start because then it probably makes you more cautious through the rest of it.
Yeah.
Well, no, obviously you don't want to have a knife pulled on you.
Yeah, but what can you do though in those situations? You can, like,
but that could happen anywhere. But
exactly.
I guess you just don't. You learn from your lessons, and there's parts of Melbourne you wouldn't want to probably walk around. You know, if you don't have to.
Yeah.
So I guess it could happen anywhere.
Yeah. But I don't know. That just set off a whole bunch of stuff. We had heaps of shit happen on that trip. We travelled for nearly just under 2 years. We were over there.
And it's cool that you had a partner that was just up for an adventure too.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, man. That's everything. It's so funny because this is just like even since then, done so much travelling and all that. And everyone keeps saying, how do you keep talking Claire into going and travelling? She's the one that talks me into it every time. I'm always the one digging my heels in going, oh, what about, we've just moved to a new house or whatever. And she's like, this is fucking boring. Let's go. You know, and it's like, oh, okay. And she's always right. Every time I say, well, I follow her anywhere and it always takes me on a venture. Amazing. You know. But we ended up like traveling all the way down to Patagonia and went hiking in the mountains and stuff. And then like we went all the way from there all the way to New York City by land. And just
on buses and stuff.
Just buses and boats and that. And man, I painted everywhere I went. I did pieces.
Yeah.
Like she was real tolerant with me. I just said, got to paint, you know. She's like, cool.
And she'll come with you or she'll just hang out?
Nah, she'd go do her own thing. She'd go, I'm going to go to the market, buy some food, make some, you know, whatever. Like, I don't know what she was up to. But it made me, it sort of sparked some adventure within me. And there was a lot of patience that needed to be had because I'd rock up to a new town, a new city, or I would even be in like fucking rural places and that, and I'd have to source the paint and then just wander around until I found somewhere to paint. And I tell you what, not once did I ever not find somewhere to paint. I always did. And I'd wander into heaps of the slums and stuff and make friends, and you know, I had some pretty sticky experiences in some of them as well. But
no one grabbing your balls though.
No, I had some Bolivian ladies try to. I tell you what, they invite me into their house for lunch, and if I paint their wall, and when you're
searching for these walls, are you looking for permission walls? Do you want to say to this person who owns this house, "Can I beautify your fucking house?" Or are you just looking for somewhere that you think is chill enough to do it?
Both. It was a mixed bag. I was just looking for opportunities, really. Yeah. Like for instance, there was this one place. There's this town in Bolivia called Sucre. And I was learning Spanish there, and then we were looking out. I was looking out the window of the Spanish school, and there was a street behind it. We had all these really good walls, and so after class, like I'd ask my teacher, like I'd say, "Look, I want to paint those walls. What are the words I need to learn and all that?" And I'd go and say that, and you'd offer to paint their walls, and I think you're crazy. They'll go, "How much are you going to charge me?" And it's like, no, I'll do it for free. And I go, "What, you'll buy the paint and everything?" And they go, "Yeah." And they'll go, "This guy's given free prime, like coats of paint to the wall, because everything's sort of mud brick, handmade, you know. So everything's very makeshift over there." So they all saw it as an opportunity to get a free prime on their wall.
Were you showing them like examples of your work? This is what it's going to look like? Or you just like, I'm going to paint it?
I said, I'm going to paint a picture on it. And they go, "What are you going to paint?" And I go, "Oh, no, I'm going to work it out yet."
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that one street, I did one, and then the neighbour would come out, go, "Can you paint my wall?" And then the person across the road would go, "Can you paint my wall?" Yeah. I painted every building on this whole street. And
with pieces, or are you doing more?
Man, I tell you what, first it was like, AEON, it just in different styles. And I thought, I got to fucking switch it up a bit. I can't, like, this is a bit getting a bit raw here. Yeah. And so I started doing like other things. I'd do characters, I'd do like some buildings and some settings. I'd start trying to push myself creatively. And then the people go, "No, I want one of them." You just point at like a wild style piece or something.
Well, it's probably something that I've never seen in the wild too often in some of these villages and stuff. They would have only seen that shit on TV and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. But they were like you know, these are like traditional like dressed Bolivian ladies and stuff.
Wow.
Like with the bowler hats and the pigtails and like I tell you what,
and you got flicks of all these stuff, like you're documenting everything.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. That's part of being a writer. You got to document your stuff, you know. Yeah. But I don't know. Like went on, had heaps of adventures over there. Anyway, like ended up getting kidnapped in the jungle in Colombia.
What? You gotta tell us about that.
Yeah, I won't go too long about it because it's a bit of a long story. But we had the Lonely Planet for because this is like we didn't even have phones. Yeah. When we were over there, this was like clear out of iPod,
digital camera,
clear out of iPod Touch, and I had a digital camera and an iPod Mini. That's all the technology we had with us. Yeah, and then we had the Lonely Planet books, and and in the one for South America, it said ways to get to Central America, so from Colombia to Panama, because there's the Darien Gap there, which is like it's 200 kilometers of jungle. And it's real hostile. It's where heaps of fucking shit goes down in there. And I don't even, like, man, you can look it up I looked it up on Wikipedia afterwards, after I made it through. And I was fucking shocked that I even went there. Yeah. That even a guidebook would say to go there. Yeah. But we got to, when we got to the other side, we opened the Central America one, and it said, "Whatever you do, don't try to go through the Darien Gap." But the other one said, "There's ways you can get through it." It's like, man, you bloody sent us in there, you know. Yeah. But we went and partied in this place called Sub-Zero, which is like on the it's in the Caribbean coast, but like at the very northern part of Colombia. And we're there for the 2011, 2012 New Year's. And like it was all cool. Had a party with the locals, all that sort of stuff. And then the next day, everyone was like real quiet, and there was and none of the shops would open. And we thought, oh, it's New Year's Day, like it's cool. This is what happens back home as well. But but then there was all these guys in like with machine guns everywhere, which you get sort of used to seeing when you're in Latin America anyway, especially Colombia. But they all instead of having like Doc Marten boots on, they all had gun boots on and like cowboy hats and baseball caps, and that's how you can spot that they're not the military. They're like the paramilitary.
Yeah,
and it turns out like the paramilitary group, the FARC, the leader of them had been murdered in a town nearby the night before. Wow. And they'd come down and they'd taken over the whole town and held the whole town hostage. And we knew, because we'd been there for nearly 2 weeks at that stage. And one of the locals came and got us and goes, "You guys got to get the fuck out of here." Because like there was us and there was a couple from Copenhagen, and we were the only Westerners and everyone else was local. So us and the couple from Copenhagen like snuck ourselves up through the jungle and pretty much smuggled ourselves into Panama. And
if they caught you, who knows what's going to happen, because they think you're sneaking out because you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, they just said, "Get the fuck out of here." But we'll like afterwards, I looked on the I looked online on Wikipedia and they were saying that they they kill everyone. And they use chainsaws to save bullets and all sorts of stuff. And this is all on Wikipedia,
Fuck,
it's
man.
like fuck. And so we ran through the jungle and got ourselves over the border into Panama, but then we got met by another group of guys in the jungle and they like marched us through at gunpoint and stuff. And it was pretty hairy, Yeah. The scariest part for me was those like, outside of Buckingham Palace, they have the huts, like the little boxes where the guys standing. So we went they had one of them in the middle of the jungle, and I was like, and they wouldn't even really talk. They'll just grunt and like poke you with their guns and stuff, and they go, "You stand in there," and I stood there. And the guy just stood there with his gun pointed at me. And I was like, fuck, this is it, And then he just stood there for a second. And I was just like, man, my life just flashed before my eyes. And then he said, "All right, get out." And then he made Claire do it. Then he made the couple from Copenhagen do it.
And what are they doing?
Found out later, because there was, that was another thing. There was a bit of foam mattress in the bottom of it. And then apparently they were making us wash the Columbia off our feet because we're now in Panama.
Oh, wow. And you thought they're going to execute you.
And I was like, man, I'm so glad I didn't like cry like a bitch and beg for my life. I was like, but the only thought that went through my head was like, man, it's been good. It's been a good run, And then they took us to this town and we were stuck there for like 4 days. And then we had no money. There's no ATMs, there's no roads, there's nothing. And we were out of cash. Couldn't bribe our way out or anything, and we ended up talking these guys into taking us to Panama City, and and they said they'd take us all the way to an ATM if we paid them, and we did that. It cost us $200 a head, and we were like, man,
money well spent.
Yeah, but when they said it, they were like Dr. Evil. It's like all like negotiating. They were like $200 each, It's like, all right, cool, let's go.
Fuck yeah.
It's hard. It's like, when you got no money, you're showing people bank cards they're loaded with cash or whatever, and there's nothing it doesn't mean shit to them. They're like, that's just a piece of plastic to here,
Yeah.
Cash rules.
Cash is king. That's what my neighbour always says.
Yeah.
Fuck, man. What a story though, dude.
But I did pieces there as well. While I was there.
Did you ever nerve out there? Like that, if you get done, you're going to be in a bit of shit?
With what, sorry?
Did you ever nerve out when you were there painting places like that if you got done, you'd be in a fair bit of shit?
To be honest, man, I think back on it now, and I reckon there's shit that I did then that I was in so much danger that I didn't even know it. And
that played in your favour because you were naive?
I was so naive. Man, I'd wander into slums on my own and paint. And I remember I was painting this one place in Peru. And it was this, I was in this this coastal town. I did all these pieces on the beachfront and all that. But then I went, and then I was looking for other spots, and I saw up on the hill, there were these big walls. And I thought, man, I'm going to go up there and paint them. And I went up there, and there was a full slum up there. And I did, I painted this wall. I did 4 pieces on this wall in one day. So I was there for hours, what I mean? And
no one says anything to you.
well, they did. Like these guys came up to me, and they and at this stage my Spanish was getting better as well. So they said, "Look, you know, like give us your money, more or less." And I said, "Well, I don't have any money on me," but I said, "But I do have beer," and I gave them all beers, and they were like, "Oh yeah, cool." Like sat there, drank beer, and then these other guys came up to rob me, and they go and they started fighting him. Go, no, this guy's cool. He gave us beer, and yeah. So that was
Is there anything beer can't do,
mate? It's magic.
It's magic.
I love it.
But that obviously that whole trip and doing all those things and painting in those places definitely helps shape your personal style. You know, like you could imagine that if you didn't do that, if you stayed in St Kilda, would your art be anywhere? Would it be in this similar sort of direction? You know?
Yeah. Well, the thing that I really learned on that trip, because I'd just go to the hardware shop and buy a bucket of roller paint and black for outline, because none of the other cans would work. It's like trying to paint with exports, if you know what I mean. Just these local brands with soccer players on them and stuff like that. So I'd just buy roller paint and black, and I'd get some white for highlights, but you know 3 days later that white's going to be gone anyway. It's just for the flick. So I learned, it just taught me how to paint really graphically, I guess. Just stripping all the color out, and what can you do with a couple of colors. And that was I know it was pretty formative for me. And when I remember, like after that, like we made it all the way to America, and when I got to America, I had all this paint, and I didn't know how to use any of the colors anymore. I had to
relearn it.
Yeah. And it took me years to relearn it, actually. Like I ended up just painting lots of one color filled pieces, and all the other writers were just going, "That's not enough, man. You got to."
But it makes you stand out, because everyone goes all over the top with colors, though.
Yeah, in some people's eyes, I was fine with it.
Yeah, but it had shaped your journey had shaped your style to there, which I think is cool.
Yeah. And you can do a lot with two colors.
Totally,
especially when one of them's black.
Yeah, very bold, and So with the roller stuff, are you saying, all right, can you tint this another color for us?
Oh yeah, they'd have a color chart,
right?
And the funny thing is, you'd be like, oh, in Nicaragua, you could tell I had 4-liter bucket of blue. Just so many blue pieces. Yeah. And then I'll get to the next country, and it's like, I'm going to go pink. Heaps of pink. Next country, orange. Yeah. And it was just like that. You can see it. And I was painted heaps. I reckon in that trip, I painted probably 400 pieces.
Wow.
At least.
How many pieces do you think you've done in your life?
I don't know.
Thousands upon thousands upon thousands.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm still a toy to some.
well, this does bring me into it. So the whole anti-style thing, or whatever people want to call it, like, where do you sit on that sort of debate? I think people can prove that they can do wild styles, but then they strip it back to that sort of stuff. I don't know. Like, you were early in that kind of thing as well, doing that. Yeah,
that was from my first trip to London in the early 2000s. Because I went over there and I was painting like a Melbourne writer, and then and people were cool with it and that, but I was really inspired by all this Euro stuff. And I remember going to Rome and just immersing myself a bit in the graph over there, and there's lots of bubble letters and stuff going on. And I remember, I was just traveling around Europe. I was seeing a different side of graffiti and how graffiti could look, and I remember sort of adding that into my style. So, Melbourne was very like lots of connections, interlocking letters and arrows and all that sort of stuff. And then there were these over in Europe, it was like lots of bubble letters and stuff.
Space.
And lots of negative space, all this type of stuff. So I started bringing some more bubble into it, but still keeping all the interlocking stuff going on. And I feel it just helped sort of mold me a bit, know. And I don't know. But when I came back to Melbourne, everyone was giving me shit. Going, what the fuck's happened to your graph? Like, man, go back to doing what you were doing before. This stuff sucks. Like, I heard that off so many people.
That have come around, do you think? Or that's just their
they would now. Yeah. But it was just...
It was different.
Like, I think it's like speaking to, say, like, say someone who's into bloody 90s hip-hop and they listen to hip hop today, like mumble rap or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's not to say mumble rap's shit. It's just that they don't understand it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand mumble rap. It's not what I'm into it, but every now and then I'll hear a tune and I go, man, that's good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I guess people just needed their eyes opened a little bit more, and I guess you've always got your staunch heads that think this is only how it works and this should only happen this way. I guess eventually they come around when they see a lot of it.
Yeah.
But with that whole anti-style thing, it's interesting because there are still some pieces that are done well, like I believe you do, and like Discreet, he does an amazing job of all that sort of stuff. But then you see some of the stuff overseas where they really take it to another level. Like it's not the 3D's wrong, like I don't know whether it's on purpose, like that whole sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like with your ones, at least it kind of still makes sense. You know where your highlights are and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but is that conditioning? You know, like am I too conditioned? Like I remember.
Would you like to unlearn that?
I'm happy with
Yeah.
what I do. You know, like, but it's, you know, for instance, I was living in Barcelona for a couple of years, and I remember Soffels came over and did a whole bunch of pieces with him, and he was really inspired by all the looseness and free flowing that was happening in Barcelona, and he was like going, man, I wanted to get really loose here, and he was like having a hard time going, fuck, I can't break these habits.
Yeah.
He'd learnt too much, you know what I mean? He was too crisp and too precise, and he was having a hard time undoing that.
Yeah.
And it's the same like with me, like, and you're saying with those guys, they've never been to that level of perfection and pushing I guess complex style to have to undo anything. They've started from shit and gone, this will do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you feel that they should have progressed and then revert back, or is that that's what they want to do?
I think everyone's on their own journey, and you've got to let them ride that out. You know?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're just going to be all clones of each other.
Totally.
You know?
And it's interesting though, because you talk about someone like Soffels. Obviously, he has the luxury of having all the different kinds of paint, different colours and all that sort of stuff. With a lot of these people, especially overseas, they don't, like you said, the paint shit. You know what I mean? You don't have the nozzles, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, it depends which country.
Yeah, but
when we say overseas, we're saying everywhere other than Australia.
I'm talking about in parts of South America or parts of Europe where they may not have the luxury of having all those sort of things at their fingertips, which I think would help that sort of, you know.
I think it's just culturally what you're around. You know, for instance, one thing I found in South America, like there was so many murals, like so many attempted photorealistic portraits of like someone with a gas mask on with a can of spray paint like that. I was like, fuck, there's another one. They were everywhere. You know, it's like there's just themes and styles you're around, and they inspire like, whoever you're growing up around, when you don't know shit and someone knows something and they tell you right from wrong, you end up taking on their beliefs, you know. It's
Well, that's how you learn a little bit, and then you can figure out maybe that person knew what they were talking about, maybe they didn't.
It is. But like, even, you know, going like sort of fast forwarding to art, I guess, you know, to fine art, like I've taken a lot of my inspirations from fine art, the fine art that I do, from graffiti and street art, and my influences from that world and people who have broken through from that world. Whereas a lot of people I've met in the art world, and artists as well, who have come from traditional backgrounds and oil painters and all that sort of stuff, they've learned a different way. They've learned a different set of rules. And so, you know, I've got I don't know, I just feel that people from the graffiti and street art world approach it from a different way, and it sort of breaks a lot of the beliefs of how art should be from you know, traditional art history sense,
because it's come from a non-conventional kind of way in the first place. And you've got to be a certain kind of differently wired person to want to go out and paint other people's property all the time. You're going to approach art differently. I guess so. I think it's just different aesthetic as well. Like when I paint anything, I'm thinking fills, outline, highlights, drop shadow. It doesn't matter if I'm painting, doesn't matter what I'm painting. Yeah.
It's just what I think. Even if I paint the characters that I paint, for instance, like, I fill it in. I use the black for outline. I don't even outline the whole thing, and the highlights of the whites of the eyes, and that's about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if you get a traditional oil painter, they would break things down into heaps of tones, and then the bone structure and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of thinking.
Totally is. Well, that's bringing me to where we're going to sort of talk next. The heads. Do we call them the heads? Yeah. So that's probably...
To be honest, I was calling characters.
Characters. They're your characters.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And that is what a lot of people would know you for. That is something that you've developed, and that's become a bit of your own sort of personal style. The characters, and I guess people call them the mullet dudes or whatever the characters.
Yeah. They started off with mullets. They don't have them anymore.
They don't have them anymore.
No, I shaved them off. I got sick of being called the mullet dude. And it's like,
were people calling you that?
Yeah, it's like, now they're not that.
So let's bring it back. Where did the first head? Obviously, you've always been drawing characters, but where do you think the essence of this head sort of theme started from?
Well, I did a wall years ago. I reckon it was 2009, and it was like a crew wall, and wanted to put characters in there. And I remember I painted some characters of some WWF wrestlers like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, and Ultimate Warrior.
Yep.
But I did them just sort of really loosely, and what you'd call naive or shit or whatever. But I was real happy with how they came out. And now I said, that's it. I want to start putting a character next to every piece I do from now on, because that's like the graph thing is like, people say a wall's complete when you got like full background and characters and stuff like that. So it was and I didn't really relate with like the b-boy characters and all that. It was cool. Like I love all that stuff, but it's just not me. It's not what I was into. And I've been, spent a lot of time in Europe as well and traveling around, and saw so many cool characters being done, especially like in like Scandinavia and all that. There was heaps of really fresh ones over there, and in Paris and stuff. And I really liked Honit from France, and Osgemios from Brazil, and Twist, San Francisco, and there was all these people who were sort of putting their stamp on with their own characters. And it's like when I saw, but they were still maintaining their respect within the graph world.
Yeah. And
it's like they weren't street artists, they were graph writers who do characters as well. And I really wanted to approach it in that way. And then it got to a point where I started I was going out a lot at night doing like throwies and quick pieces and stuff like that. And I started just painting them instead of letters. And then, and it was, around that time, I remember there was lots of street art, like in graffiti, people starting to document stuff and put it on the internet. Yeah. And I remember I'd go out with like a good lineup of guys and girls, and they'd all do letters, and I'd do the heads. And then the heads would be like the most photographed thing, and it would be popping up all over the place. And it's like, oh, I think I'm onto something here.
Yeah.
And, heaps of my mates gave me shit for it. Going, mate, don't do that shit.
Really?
Yeah. And I just thought, fuck it, this is what I want to do,
Yeah.
And
but when do you remember where you were when you first drew your first head or put it on a wall? Like,
well, the ones that the way they look right now, I know the first place I did that. I was in Mumbai in India.
Yeah.
And I've been traveling with some mates on a graph trip. Like I had some I was traveling over there for about 4 months, and a month of that, Claire wanted to do a yoga teacher training course in Rishikesh in India. And we were on our honeymoon actually, and I was just like, what, you're gonna want me to sit around for a month while you study yoga? And she's like, if you don't mind. It's like, no fucking way. So I said, look, especially on our honeymoon, I go, look, if I can talk some artists to come over to India and travel for a month with me, you can go do a yoga course. So I contacted some mates in London, Tizer and Ebot, and they flew over and met me in Bangalore. And she went off to do a yoga course, and we just painted. We traveled the whole length of India vertically.
Wow.
and it was while on that trip, I was painting, like, because I was trying to paint characters with like sort of torso up, sometimes full body, full standing and that. And I kept realizing there were so many things to get right. You know, especially when you're painting fast on the street, you know, arms are too short or legs are too short or something kept going wrong. And it's like, man, there's too many elements to get right here to paint fast. And then we got to this one wall in Mumbai, and we painted like 3 spots that day. And all we had left was a bucket of roller paint and a whole bag of black spray paint. And yeah, I pretty much replicated what I'd been doing in South America and took them along for the ride, and they loved it. Yeah. You know, and then we found this awesome wall, and they said, "Oh, what are we going to do here? We've only got 2 colors and this and that." And it's like, no, I reckon we're all good. And I said, "How about if we do a whole bunch of like egg shapes all along the wall, and then we just get the black cans and just turn them into faces?" And that was the first time I'd done it, like really focusing on like just getting rid of the rest of the body and all that sort of stuff. And then, it was like a light bulb moment for me. Yeah. I said to the guys, I go, "I'm going to roll with this." They go, "Cool, go for it," you know? Yeah. And I've just been rocking just the heads ever since, you know?
The heads ever since. And do you start drawing them or painting them or whatever, and it's the same guy, or it's always a variation?
It starts with an oval.
Yeah.
And it depends on, like, I've got heaps of staples, and everyone goes, "Oh, you just paint the same head over and over," and it's like, but in my mind they're all different. And it's like, but if you do like, you know, a longer nose on one, or the jaws a bit lower, like they vary. A face can vary very easily. You know, if you look at all us humans on the planet, we all got 2 eyes, nose, and a mouth, and all that, but we all look different.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, go for it.
Is there any female heads? They're all just male.
Man, it's been requested many times. I can't do it. They just look like bloody ugly blokes, you know,
with a wig on.
Yeah, it just look like it's not me, you know.
Yeah,
it's just not like, I mean, I've done because I've done jobs incorporating it, and people would be like, "How about a bit of diversity? Where's the chicks and all this sort of stuff?" And it's like, hey, there's plenty of artists out there doing females, you know. It's like, then they're doing a good job of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't think it's overly masculine. You're not doing it because it's just for dudes. It's just that's the thing that you enjoy doing. And they're interesting with the facial hair and stuff, I guess, is another aspect. Yeah.
But I incorporate a lot of like nature and plant life and stuff into my art, and I see that as being the feminine element to my to the masculine heads, you know.
Yeah.
So if I do like a pot plant with a head on it, and then a plant popping out of it, it's like it's balanced, you know.
That's the feminine energy.
Yeah,
that totally makes sense. And now you're not only just doing their heads, but you're also working a lot more with airbrushing and that sort of thing. And is that something that came naturally from the aerosols thing, or?
I wouldn't say naturally.
It was a
fucking painstaking journey to get to finally be using the airbrush, you know. And it was from like, you know, just years of trying to do, because the artwork I've always done incorporates a lot of line work. You know, I just love, like, black outline is what I've grown up with, is what I've used my whole graph career and all that. You know, I've varied here and there, but it's pretty much the staple for me. And so when I started doing more artwork and studio work, I was trying to do all these line work with the brush, and I was just hating it. And I was just like, if this is what I've got to do a painting, I've got to find a different way to paint, like, because it's not enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
And at first I was trying to find all different markers and different things, like mark making things I could like draw with. And then I was sharing a studio with my mate Pilfer, and he borrowed an airbrush off another guy at the studio, and we were messing around with that.
Was this at the Arts Hall?
Yeah,
okay.
And that was like a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what I want to use from now on. You know?
Yeah. You had some interesting people at the Arts Hall there.
Oh yeah.
Still going there?
I was there yesterday. I popped in to say hi.
Glenn's still down there?
Didn't see him, but he's still there.
Yeah. Good fun space. I used to pop my head in there and just say hello and have a beer and stuff on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy that kind of community? Like, I know you've got your own space now by yourself, but do you enjoy like that kind of communal kind of? Do you find that pushes you more, or you prefer to be in your own little solo studio?
I like my own space, but I love collaborating with other artists and networking with other artists and just being part of a community as well. Like I, for instance, my current studio, I've got my next door neighbours are ceramicists, so I find that nowadays I'm actually making a lot of ceramics and stuff with them.
Saw that you're doing the ceramic slippers and all sorts of interesting stuff.
Yeah. They're all pieces for a show that's opening next week. So,
well, why don't you tell us about the show?
Yeah, I got an exhibition at Lennox Street Gallery in Richmond.
Yep.
Yeah, it opens on. There's opening night on the 5th of October, and it runs through till the 22nd of October. And man, I've spent a whole year working on this body of work. Like I started it last October, and I've really immersed myself in it. It's I've pushed myself as far as I ever have with my artwork, and
making
really,
3-dimensional stuff which you hadn't really worked with too much before.
I've dabbled in. Yeah, it's with because when I was at the Arts Hall, the downstairs neighbours furniture makers, and so I worked with them making little sculptures and bringing more 3D elements into my artwork. But with this, I think it's more the paintings I'm really proud of. Like a lot of them there's art within art, and then the paintings that are featured in the paintings are also hanging next to the paintings. It sounds confusing, but
no, it sounds cool.
I'm doing I'm working with a lot of ideas and painting my surroundings a lot more as well.
Yeah, so that's cool, and that's here in Melbourne. But you're currently based up north.
Yeah.
What took you up there?
I went on during the lockdowns in Melbourne. There was a little blip, a little opening there, and Claire and I jumped in the car and drove up to Byron Bay for 3 weeks for a 3-week holiday. And week 2 they closed all the borders on us.
So
and
you got lucky there.
Yeah, I guess so. It was once again, it was one of those stressful at the time, but it was the way it was meant to be. And ended up. After a few months, I ended up we stayed in some Airbnbs that were heavily discounted, which was really handy.
Yeah. And
then and I got a studio with a friend, Adnate, who's up there as well.
Yep.
And then I finally found a house to rent, because the rentals, you go on the rental sites, there was 2 places to rent. It was really hard to get.
I heard people are up there. A friend of ours works in real estate. 200 people are applying for a rental property.
Yeah, I know. Well, we got one. We found a place in Mullumbimby, but we had to furnish it and all that.
Yep.
And then so I had a studio set up, fully furnished a house, and then the borders open, and they're like, "Oh, you can come home now, but you'll be in lockdown when you get back, but you're welcome to come home." And it's just nah, man, we're all right.
Yeah. I'm
learning to surf now. Yeah.
So you're not planning on coming back anytime soon?
I'm here now, but I've still I've been out there for on and off for 2 years now.
Yeah,
and I come back here every 2 or 3 months. I'm quite fine.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I love watching footy and that. And I got a bunch of mates up there from Melbourne as well, and we'll catch up on the weekend to be watching the footy.
Yeah.
And go for a swim at half time and everything, and then
Awesome.
just be watching everyone in their puffer jackets and beanies, and it's starting to rain on them at the MCG and all that. And we're like, nah, man, we're all right.
Yeah. But so you're happy there for now, but you think you'll come back to Melbourne full time eventually?
Mate,
Don't know.
I've left Melbourne 7 or 8 times in my life. It's always home. I'll always come back. But I've lived in all sorts of parts of the world, and every time I've moved there, if you said how long you're going to be here for, I've never known. It's just one day something happens. Like when I moved to Barcelona, I didn't know how long I was going to be there for, and I had a really good job over there. Had an art studio, had all sorts of stuff.
Good skate scene there too.
Good skate scene. I was living just around the corner from Macba, the big skate plaza.
That's the Mecca over there, isn't it?
Man, it was I was seriously living 50 meters away from that place.
Yep.
And I was hanging out there every day, and and it got to a point where one day it was just like the decision was made and it's just like time to go home, you know, and it's, but when you're in it, you don't know.
Yeah.
You just got to wait for that moment. So right now I can't give you an answer. You know.
That's cool though, man.
Yeah.
Just let it play out.
Yeah.
So you've got this show coming up, but you've worked with a few big galleries and a few different sort of big names in that sort of scene. Have you had good experiences with those sort of things, or you'd rather do things a little bit more independently when you're exhibiting your work?
I want to work with big galleries, to be honest.
Yep.
Because this is something I didn't really touch on before, but after the South America trip and getting to New York, we ended up flying over to London, and I did another stint there. And while I was there, I got a job working for Christie's, the auction house.
Yep.
And that was my big introduction to art. And all these guys that I was hanging out with in the first stint in London, like D-Face and all those guys. And yeah, and like, you know, like I wasn't really, you know, I wasn't mates with Banksy and all that, but he was part of the crew and he was, you know, be at the same bars and stuff.
Yeah.
You start seeing all these guys pop up in these, like I was a graphic designer, I was laying out all the catalogs and stuff and just going, man, like, and then like just going, fuck, these guys come from my world. And I even know some of them.
Yeah.
And then you see like Barry McGee and then all these like artists from like France and that, like Invader and all these other people who sort of come up and it's like, man, I've been doing this shit as long as all those guys. Like I want to give this a solid crack. But the thing that really inspired me was there was so many people I'd never heard of and so much art that I looking at going, I reckon I could do that. You know, I could do that. And it just got me pumped to give you know, fine art a good crack, you know.
Yeah.
And over time, it's just overtaken like all the graffiti and all that sort of stuff. Like, I don't even really think about graph that much anymore.
Yeah.
And
You're still scratching that itch with painting every day, but just in a studio instead of the street.
It's just changed the format. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like
so where does AEON end and Tom Gerrard, the artist? Do you know, like, so is the heads, are they AEON or are they Tom Gerrard?
It's all Tom Gerrard.
It is?
Yeah. In 2016, I just fucking... chopped it off. I quit my job and went full time with my art, and I just went, mate, AEON's never made a cent in like 25 years of painting, thousands of pieces, all this sort of stuff.
Cost you money.
Cost me shitloads.
Yeah.
Had a great time, don't get me wrong, but that's not a career. Like, there's no career in graffiti. I don't know who makes money off graffiti.
Yeah, no.
Like I tell you what, the only people that can really make money off graffiti are those, like, you have to be a true icon, like, you know, Blade, Futura, people like that. Scene. But even if you look at like say Futura's a really good example, right? Like he's kept the name, and same with Cause, they've kept the name, but they're not doing they're not doing pieces for a living, you know. Like who does graph pieces for a living? Soffles, actually.
Maybe, he probably, you know,
but very few.
There's a few that do big murals that, But
are they doing pieces?
Yeah, a lot of them not, no.
I guess Deviate sneaks him in.
He does.
But he's not employed to do a Deviate piece. He's employed to paint these birds and nature and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It's like it came to this point where I was so burnt out on doing graphic design. I was fucking over it, you know, and I was sick of being told what to do and having people treat me like I'm, I don't know, like after doing so much art throughout my life, I got to a point where I was working as a freelance graphic designer, so I was like there to pick up the slack, you know, and there was no respect in that, and I just thought, this is it. I need to do my own thing, and I find that now that I'm a full-time artist, my studio is actually run like a graphic design studio. Like I still use all the design packages almost on a daily basis, and you know, I'm doing like brand collaborations and like working like a design studio, but every day I'm making paintings and I'm sending them off to galleries and doing all sorts of stuff, you know.
Is it, obviously it's pretty cool when you get these sort of commission jobs to paint these big buildings and that sort of thing, like businesses. Do they give you free rein, or are they like yes and no?
Oh, every job's different, you know.
But like, if you turn up and you're like, I'm not feeling the heads here, I'm going to do some plants and I'm going to do some, streetscape stuff. Are they like sometimes like, nah, we wanted the heads?
Well, it depends, because like a lot of the times the heads aren't for sale because they're my thing. Especially if a brand wants to align themselves with that and go, this is us. That's not them, it's me.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like when I do brand collaborations, I have to always state that it has to be, Tom Gerrard X brand name. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it can never be the brand and just my imagery. It's and I always negotiate for that and push for it.
And like I've got one at home, but the Evolve board collab, that's pretty cool. How did that come about?
I guess just a conversation. I was always pretty keen, because Paran's my local skate park when I'm living in Melbourne, and man, you're there. I was there, like I'd be there every Sunday just drinking beers and skating with my mates and stuff, and every second person would have an Evolve shop board, and I was just thinking, oh man, like I want to get a graphic, And then when I spoke to them, it was the same thing. It's like, look, I'll do a graphic for you, but I got to be credited for it, And I technically got my own pro model.
Amazing.
I'm shitter than I've ever been.
That's cool though, man.
But it was really, really good. Like, Josh is really cool, and he's known my art for years, and also the city of Stonington, where Paran and South Yarra and all that is, they've always had a lot of love for me, because I've got a lot of jobs around there, and I've done a lot of big murals around there.
Yep.
And so I'm a bit of a staple around there. Yeah. And it's been like I've had opportunities open up for me around there, which has been really good.
Yeah. And it's good because I've spent a lot of my life around there as well, and street art, graffiti, whatever you want to call it, is pretty embraced. I moved a bit further out, and the councils won't let people paint any of the walls. It's not allowed to look like graffiti. So it is pretty embraced around there, and those guys are I guess they have to embrace it, but it's good that they do.
Yeah.
Summit, man, when we moved down a little bit further to Kensington, Kingston, they won't let any murals look like graffiti anywhere. And that's just shit, I think. Well, I think so.
Yeah.
They'll commission people just to paint a wall, and it has to just look like some boring fucking... Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a tough argument, because there's lots of different people, lots of different tastes, lots of different styles, lots of different artists out there. It's like, man, it's a I don't know, it's a big grey area.
Yeah,
because everyone's got their own opinions on what's good or not, and it depends on who the gatekeeper of that community is.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, where I'm living now, it's like there's no one painting murals or anything around there. There's just no opportunity. But then I'll like pop into the Gold Coast and try and get opportunities around there, but they're not into my art because it's I guess considered too progressive for them or whatever, because it's
they want a surfboard and
very Melbourne based
in a bikini or something painted on the building.
Who knows?
Yeah.
but it just depends on who's signing off on it, But I think it's like if you can get out there and get your stuff seen and noticed, it's like hearing a song. First time you hear it, you might not like it, but by the fifth time you're singing along and tapping your foot. It's the same with art. Like you need to get your stuff seen and
repetition.
Yeah, repetition, and it's like I see my artwork being like Vegemite. It's like you either love it or you hate it, and what can you do? It's not going to stop me from painting.
No, it's just me. You've obviously found a fan base, and people are digging it, and it's awesome. You've done a lot of solo shows, you've done a lot of group exhibitions and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And is it cool to get now do you feel like you've made it? You're actually cemented, you are a fine artist. Do you feel like that now, or is it always a little bit of imposter syndrome sort of creeps in?
I wouldn't say imposter syndrome, because I back myself on the hours I've put into my craft. I spend 8 hours a day painting, and then when I'm not at work, I'm thinking about art. I've done a drawing every day for over 10 years with non-graph drawing.
Amazing.
And that's really helped progress my artwork. And I just, you reach a certain level and you're looking at the next level and you think, oh man, I'm nothing compared to those guys. And so it's always climbing the ladder. It's just different rungs of the ladder. But as far as being able to make a full-time living off my art, like I feel so blessed, because I've had so many different jobs in my life, and I've seen the insides of so many different businesses, and like I just never want to work for anyone ever again. Like this is my dream.
Yeah,
and I'm
awesome.
living it, so yeah.
And even in the fine arts scene, you feel like you belong there now?
I never felt that I didn't belong there.
Okay.
Like there was something something that happened over COVID, right? I started, like, it's like COVID happens and then you all sort of, it shakes everyone up and you start picking up different habits, One of the habits I picked up was starting to really study art just from using YouTube. And every day while I eat my lunch, and I still do it till this day, I'll watch YouTube videos on art. And I'll have a big list of things. Like I'll always think of different artists to study and things to study. And it's not just like I'll study like art history, but also like the fundamentals of art, and also listen to lots of interviews with other artists speaking. And my a lot of my self-consciousness around my art was around, I can't speak that artsy talk that I thought you needed to learn how to speak. Yeah. And then what I realized is you don't actually need to, as an artist, you don't need to learn to speak that stuff. You just need to speak honestly about your artwork. Yeah. And all that, like that artsy talk, whatever you want to call it, is all spoken by the curators, the art dealers,
not the artists,
the people
themselves.
Selling it, the art historians, all that. But if you listen to any interview with any artist, well, not any artist, because some artists do speak that talk, but most artists will just say it like it is. The light hit that tree and I was mesmerized by it, and I just painted it. I love the shadow it set off, and that's why that painting looks like that. Just matter of fact.
They break it down. It's more simple.
Yeah.
When the dealers and stuff are trying to overcomplicate it and make it sound more complex than it needs to be.
Yeah, and when people are using words you don't know the meaning of and all that, it can be really intimidating.
Yeah, totally.
But now I know I stand behind my art and I'll just be like, what's that word? I don't know what that means. I'm not afraid because I've done those. I've realised that I don't need to speak that way.
Yeah, and talking about studying other art, it's a good segue here because you've got your own podcast, the Bench Talk podcast, which you've done a lot of episodes, and that must be awesome for you to chat to other artists and get an insight into their thinking and how they approach stuff.
Yeah, that was a real game changer for me. I moved from Barcelona back to Melbourne in 2016. And while I was in Barcelona, I was listening to lots of podcasts while I was working for a design agency over there. And I was just looking for a podcast that had artists talking about their artwork, especially street artists and all that type of stuff. And it just didn't exist. And I was saying to Claire, like we went camping in Spain, and I said, when we get back to Melbourne, I'm going to start a podcast. And she started laughing at me. And it's like, what? And she's like, you interview people? And it's like, yeah, I know. I know I haven't done it, but give me a go,
Yeah.
And I got myself a microphone and, in 2016, started interviewing artists. And by the time I got to like episode 20, I quit my job and become a full-time artist because I was really focused on so how are you doing it? So how do you build your career? And how do you... So
you were learning from the inside,
Yeah, exactly. Because my dream was to be a full-time artist.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be stuck in graphic design for the rest of my life because I was actually contemplating opening my own design studio and everything because it's sort of the path of a designer. You work in all these advertising agencies and all this sort of stuff, and then eventually if you don't want to work for people anymore, you open your own agency. And I got to a point where it's like, that looks like what I'm going to have to do, and I really don't want to do that. I just want to paint,
Yeah. It's interesting that it was episode 20 you got to, because this is episode 20 of this show.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mate, quit your job, full-time podcast.
Full-time.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be a long way before I start making any money. Yeah. But, no, that's awesome. And so... Are you doing those live or a few over Skype and that sort of thing?
Oh, a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on who I interview. If someone's around, I'll do it face to face. It's always better. But I'm open to do it over Skype or Zoom or whatever. I've interviewed a lot of people overseas, and whenever I go traveling, I take a microphone with me and sit down with as many artists as I can. And I've had periods where I've taken breaks from it, but always come back to it. I love it.
Anyone that you want to get on that hasn't done it yet that we might be able to hear some of in the future? Like, is there anyone lined up?
So many people.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. I remember for a while I was focused just on Melbourne. Man, like I reckon I've interviewed probably 120 artists from Melbourne, and I've hardly scratched the surface.
Yeah.
That's just one city.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many artists around the world, like amazing artists everywhere. It's like you never run out of people to interview. It's amazing. There's a lot of people pursuing their dreams and doing their thing.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's awesome that you get to learn that sort of shit by talking to people who are your peers and your friends as well, you know?
Yeah, totally. But also, I made heaps of friends from doing it as well. Like, and it's opened heaps of doors for me and created a lot of opportunities. And, you know, I think it's a great thing. Like, there's even been people who's like, man, I really want to talk to that person or meet that person. But you say, oh, like, you know, do you want to grab a coffee or beer? And no. Oh, do you want to do an interview with me? Yeah, all right. Like, it's a different thing, you know. It's like you get an hour of their time and sit down and have a chat,
awesome.
You know. Yeah.
Do you think, is the audience predominantly other artists, or you think it's a bit of a mixed bag between?
I don't know. I think it's mostly artists, but I've it's hard to say because, to be honest, I stopped looking at the numbers. Like, it was, I don't know. I'm not a numbers guy. Like, I don't give a shit about how many likes I get on a post on Instagram. I don't track how many followers I have on this or that, or how many listens each podcast gets. Yeah. I know that it's like business to do that stuff, but I feel that you're battling algorithms and all sorts of shit, and it can just drive you insane, you know. Whereas, but I do get a lot of feedback from artists saying that they listen to it. You know, especially a lot of people painting murals and in their studios and that. They're like, it's just really good to just work and listen to other artists talk to each other. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that talking to other people, you learn ways to do things or ways to attack certain problems that you wouldn't have thought of. You know what I mean? Like it helps you think, oh, this person does it like this. I never thought to do it like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Man, I ask for heaps of advice on the podcast. Yeah. How do you do this? How do you do that?
How do you do that? Yeah, just pick their brain there.
Yeah. How'd you get in with that gallery?
Is there people that haven't been keen to do it or haven't been, you know?
Yeah, all the time.
I say that it's just not for everybody, yeah.
Yeah, hey, I fire out messages like probably 3 a week. And I might get 1 yes and 2 no's. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know?
And people are generally polite when they say no.
Yeah. Oh, you just don't hear from them.
That's the word. I get that a bit where I'm talking and we're DMing. I'm like, would you like to do it? And then they don't write back. I'm like, oh, you could have just said, no, it's not for me, you know?
Yeah. But the people don't like saying no, you know. It's easier just to ghost them, you know.
It's funny, like I've asked some people to be on this show and initially they just didn't say yes, and then after they see some of the people, they're like, actually, do you still want to do it? So I think that must happen a bit with yours as you build more momentum. People go, oh yeah, I'm keen to do it now. I get how it works, you know.
Yeah. It's, you know, I don't know. I just fire it out there and just see how it goes, you know, see what sticks, you know, because I feel it sort of just guides you, you know. It's like that wasn't meant to be, and this one is, you know.
It's it all kind of seems to fall in place.
Yeah.
For sure. So besides your solo exhibition, which tell us again when it is.
It opens on the 5th of October at Lennox Street Gallery, which is in Lennox Street in Richmond, it's right near the Corner Hotel. Yep.
Which everyone's familiar with the Corner Hotel.
Yeah, it's the easiast way to explain.
Lennox Street's the next one down towards Burnley. Yeah.
It's just right near the corner of Swan Street and Lennox Street.
And besides that, what else have you got coming up, or anything else that you'd want to tell people about? Any other teasers? Anything else?
Not a lot really. I've to be honest, I spent a whole year working on this exhibition, and the biggest thing for me, it runs till the 22nd of October, and I'd appreciate anyone who's into my art. Go check it out because I think you'd be pleasantly surprised with what I've been doing. I've been keeping it under wraps. It's like when a band or a musician's working on an album, they don't play any of the songs until it's done. It's a bit like that. So I feel like I've been keeping a lot of it under wraps for a long time.
And does it feel now that I'm guessing all your works are finished and you're complete and you're ready to go, does it feel like a big weight's off your shoulders?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
You'll take a little break after this and then...
I don't know. I'm starting a mural tomorrow. Yeah, it's just non-stop, you know. It's like you got to... I don't know. I just love to paint. Like I feel like I've been very honed in on a body of work for a long time.
Yeah.
So now I've got an opportunity to be free creatively again, and I'm interested to see where it takes me.
Awesome. All right, we'll have to keep a lookout for that one. Is it in the street somewhere?
That one's in Abbotsford.
Yeah.
It's sort of along the train lines, actually, in between Collingwood Station and West Richmond or North Richmond.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No, you've pretty much nailed it. But one of the things I'm working on at the moment that I didn't mention before is I'm working on an art career academy with my wife Claire.
Yep.
And it's sort of off the back of the podcast. I've been working with a lot of artists to help them, I guess, turn their art into a career.
It's a mentorship type scenario.
It is. It's like an online course.
Yep.
Well, it is an online course, and it's been really interesting doing that. And we've run the first round, and we had 12 students, and had a really positive feedback on that from all of them. And it's more helping them, when you're an artist and you get to a certain point where you're stuck in the studio on your own trying to work out how to make it all work. And, it's going to be a bit of a lonesome experience. And we just sort of help teach them some tricks and
build a little community with them.
Build some community with them and also help guide them on the steps to help build their career and make some money and take their art to where they want to go,
So the first round, you said there was 12 students. Are they for a mixed bag of like fine art people or people that make different sort of stuff? Like, is it mostly...
Yeah. It's mostly aimed at painters, to be honest. But there was a lot of people who come from graffiti and street art who were in there. And there were artists from all over the world, really. There was a guy from Oslo, someone else over in Glasgow, in Scotland. And It's more just helping people take the next step with their art career. Yeah. And it's so it's called the Art Career Academy. And it's online, and we run it. We run it every few months at the moment as like a 6-week program. Like,
is there a link on your website or something? I'll put a link to it on the YouTube video.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. That'd be awesome. Yeah, but it's been a real big focus of mine for the last for the last year or so, just building it all. And it's really challenging to, you can know something, but then when you go to teach it, you really have to know it. And it's really fired me up to pick up my game. And there's things that I'm teaching in there going, gee, am I doing that? It's like it's actually lifted my own game. And it's been really inspirational for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I did hear some of the little ads that you had during the podcast when I was listening to Bench Talk. So it's cool that's definitely... It must be rewarding when you've been working on something like that to see it in place and get the rewards of people actually doing it and seeing them progress as well.
Yeah. Because I get, like, through the podcast, I'd get so many DMs and like emails to the email address and everything on people wanting advice, like career advice from their art career.
Yep.
And it just, Claire's a professional coach, like business coach and mindset coach. And we just got talking about it and going, oh, let's make this happen, And really, really proud of the work we've done with it.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to checking that out as well. I'm sure there's going to be heaps of stuff that people are going to tell me. You didn't ask him about this. You didn't ask him about that. Yeah. But
there's only so many hours, man.
There's only so many hours. And next time you're in Melbourne for another exhibition, or even if you're just down to paint a mural, I'd love you to come on again, man.
Yeah, wow, I'd love to.
Let's do it again.
We'll pick up from graph and talk more about art.
Art.
Oh man, I could talk for ever about art. I love it so much, you know.
And that's the thing. And with all the guests that I get on, people like we could talk for hours, and I'm sure we will talk after we stop rolling. And then I often talk out the front of the car park. We could talk forever, but we do have to wrap it up at some stage, unfortunately. But thanks for coming, Tom.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.